さあ始まりましたインサイダー。もはやですね、この AI をうまく使いこなせるかどうかでも人生すら変わりかねないこの状況で、今日はですね、元 OpenAI の研究者でいらっしゃいますジェニー・シャオさんにお越しいただきました。よろしくお願いします。 Thank you for coming.
Excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. シャオさんはですね、OpenAI の研究者として、非常に AI の技術にお詳しい、かつですね、今はベンチャーキャピタルとして、投資もされているということで、次のですね AI の宝の山は何なのか、今日はですね、そのあたりから伺っていきたいと思います。まず最初の質問ですけれども、OpenAI という会社はどんな会社でした？
In the early days, or in the early days of OpenAI was, it was a nonprofit. I actually really pissed off my mom when I decided to join OpenAI because I was a PhD student at Columbia University, and at the time I had an offer to go to DeepMind and an offer to go to OpenAI, and my salary at OpenAI was like about a third of DeepMind, so I took a huge haircut when I decided to join OpenAI. But I was very idealistic. I was 23 years old. I was like, hey, I want to go work for this nonprofit, and my mom was really pissed because she was like, oh, you're leaving a very good PhD program for this tiny little startup in the Mission. The Mission is not known to be a very good district in San Francisco, for those of you who don't know. And in the very early days, OpenAI was very small. There was only 50, 100 people. Almost everyone was a researcher. There's no one working on product or commercialization. People were very idealistic. There was a very big AI safety culture, which I really resonated with. A lot of my friends are early employees at OpenAI as well, and almost everyone scattered across the AI safety institutions today. So very, very different than today. I think OpenAI is definitely becoming a behemoth of a company.
OpenAI まさに最初はノンプロフィットで非営利でその安全性にかなり意識がある会社に見えたんですけれども、その後ですね、マイクロソフトと組んだり、その辺かなりイーロン・マスクが批判したりしてましたけど、その OpenAI はその最初の非営利のまま会社としては全然変わってないですか？
Well, I won't comment on that, but I actually have a friend, one of my best friends from OpenAI, sued OpenAI. He led a whole lawsuit joining Elon Musk's lawsuit against OpenAI, specifically criticizing OpenAI's flip from nonprofit to for-profit, saying that it violated OpenAI's charter. And then he's also a very open critic of OpenAI's safety measures. I think from my perspective, being a nonprofit definitely is better for safety, but I've also seen OpenAI really struggle with funding financing when it was a nonprofit. I don't think most people remember this, but in the very early days of OpenAI, it was very reliant on billionaires donating to fund its research. And there was multiple points in OpenAI's history that the company almost went bankrupt because there's not enough donations to fund OpenAI's research.
いずれにしてもやっぱその AI のですね、インパクトが非常に社会的に大きいので、皆さん期待もしつつ不安も持ったりというところだと思うんですけども、さっきお話を伺っていて、その初期の AI に参画されていた時に不安も感じてたとおっしゃったと思うんですけども、今この OpenAI を経て、そしてベンチャーキャピタルを経て AI に対する怖さっていうことに関しては、ジェニーさん自身はどういうふうに思っていらっしゃいますか
？I think I'm long-term very scared about the AI. There's two reasons. One is that I'm very worried about, in the very near term, I'm worried that AI is going to lead to massive job loss, especially in a country like the US where we don't really have very good labor protection. We're already seeing that if you look at LinkedIn data, the amount of demand for junior labor has gone down almost 20% between 2023 and today, and a large part of that is because of AI. There's a study by Yale and then another study by Harvard, specifically focusing on the impact of ChatGPT and other AI models on labor demand, and it basically all these research shows that the demand for junior talent has gone down as a result of AI. So that's something that I'm very worried about. I don't have kids yet, but if I do have kids, I'd be very worried about what should they major in, what should they do after they grow up, because there might not be that many white-collar jobs left anymore in the next 5-10 years, just because most of these jobs can be automated. And the other thing that I'm long-term very concerned about is humans have never encountered any species that's smarter than us, right? We've always been the smartest species on Earth, which is why we're out here like doing podcasts, doing YouTube, and the gorillas are in the zoo. What happens if AI becomes smarter than us? We don't really know. We don't really know what a more intelligent creature wants to do to us, let alone, be confident that we're able to control the AI.
そこもうちょっと伺いたいんですけど、まさにみんなその心配をしていて、人間の仕事が AI に奪われるんじゃないかと、特に今すでにアメリカでもコンサルだったりとかホワイトな仕事、高付加価値の知的な産業ほどですね、すでに人がいらなくなって解雇っていうか雇用を募集するのをやめたりという動きがあると思いますけども、これはこの先に行くと、もちろんどの技術が出るかにもよるかと思うんですけども、人間の雇用っていうのはどうなっていくというふうに思ってますか？
I think it's going to be very painful. I actually had a first-hand view of this back in 2023. So this is when ChatGPT just started impacting labor markets, and this is when I just left OpenAI. I was a speaker at a business school in Chicago, and when I was talking to their graduating class of MBA students, everyone wanted to have a job in consulting, and then only 2 out of 50 students got return offers from consulting companies, and that is wild to me. I was like, wow, if this is like any normal year, everyone would have had jobs in consulting or equivalent careers. And if you look at like the unemployment rates for students like that, even if you look at unemployment rates of Harvard MBA students or Stanford MBA students, it is 3 times as high as it used to be. And right now our fund is hiring for an associate, and I've never seen this before, but like there are thousands of applicants like coming in through our LinkedIn, and we haven't really promoted it yet. It just shows you like how many people are out there seeking a job. I have friends who tell me, friends who are younger who tell me that they've been applying for hundreds and thousands of jobs, not really hearing an answer. I think the youth unemployment rate is going to get higher, especially in a country like the US, which is being affected by this the earliest. And I think AI is going to wipe out the middle class. I know this is like a very exaggerated saying, but like the middle class is it's basically an artifact of the Industrial Revolution, where you had a lot of white-collar jobs. Because everything's industrialized, you had a need for educated workers, educated employees, and then, therefore lawyers and doctors and the entire middle class. I think when AI takes out a lot of white-collar jobs, I think, we're in I'm pretty pessimistic about it. I think we're going to go into a world where you have the upper class who's above the AI, and then a lower class that's ruled by the AI, and then the middle class is going to get hollowed out. It's going to be extreme economic inequality across the world.
今お子さんいらっしゃらないとお伺いしましたけど、もしジェニーさんお子さんがいたとしたらどんな仕事を勧めますか？
I think the only stable job is going to be entrepreneurship. Because you can't really replace an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is someone who initiates something, who goes out and does something, and then those are the kind of people who are able to use AI and to empower themselves instead of being replaced by AI. There's still going to be a whole class of people who won't be replaced by AI, and I think those would be entrepreneurs. And this is also a trend that I'm seeing in the most elite schools in the U.S. I talk to undergraduate students at UC Berkeley, at Stanford, at Harvard, and an increasing percentage of them want to become entrepreneurs. If you talk to these students 10 years ago, most of them will say, hey, I want to work for a bank, I want to work for Morgan Stanley, or I want to work for Google, I want to work as a consultant. But nowadays, you go on these college campuses of the most elite colleges in the US, like a lot of people want to become entrepreneurs. A lot of people are applying for seed programs of accelerators, and so a lot of them want to work for startups. My husband is actually also an entrepreneur, and he's hired quite a few young talents from Harvard, from Stanford, and from other top schools. And these people specifically want to work for a startup because they want to become an entrepreneur themselves in the next 5 years, 10 years. And I think the smartest American kids are already like making a decision for themselves.
一方でこのマーケット的には、多くの人がもうすでに AI バブルなんじゃないかと、特にそのデータセンターの投資をするにあたってそれほどのこのレベニューがないんじゃないかということで過剰投資だということを言いますけども、その技術のこの先の今開発中のところを見ていらっしゃるジェニーさんから見ると、そのマーケットで言われているこれは過剰投資だと AI バブルだと いう指摘に関してはどうお考えになりますか？
I think there's a lot of people talking about whether there's an AI bubble, but I think what people miss is a definition of what an AI bubble is. And for me, an AI bubble is really when there's a disconnect between value and valuation. And when people talk about the AI bubble, no one really says how much they should value AI companies, right? Because if you think there's a disconnect between value and valuation, tell me what you think the valuation is, right? Because AI companies should not be worth zero, and we're not, like the demand for AI data centers should not be zero. Tell me like what you think the valuation is. Tell me what you think the demand is. And we've actually come up with a new framework internally at our fund to value AI companies, and it looks very differently than traditional SaaS companies. Basically, we think that the difference between AI companies and SaaS companies is that AI companies face a zero value threshold. If once you cross that threshold, what happens is that for enterprise SaaS companies, value declines very slowly, but for AI companies, value declines very quickly. For foundation models, this means that if their performance is overtaken by open source models, their value basically goes to zero. And then for application models, this basically means that if they're overtaken, if they're absorbed by foundation models, their value goes to zero as well. So AI companies face that kind of threat. The other difference between AI companies and enterprise SaaS companies is that the marginal cost of producing a new product for enterprise SaaS is zero, but it's not zero for AI. AI companies are basically software on the outside, but basically infrastructure companies on the inside, on the back end. But taking those things together, we actually think AI companies deserve a lower multiple compared to SaaS companies and not a higher multiple. Right now, the market says that AI companies are worth 40 to 50x the multiple of their ARR, whereas like SaaS companies maybe deserve 20 to 30x multiples. But we think the number for AI companies should be, at least a little bit lower than SaaS companies because of the two issues that we mentioned.
ぜひ伺いたいのは、ジェニーさんは研究者でいらっしゃって、非常にその AI に関する論文なんかもかなり技術的に読み込まれるというふうに聞いてますけども、で今はそのベンチャーキャピタル投資もやってらっしゃると、やはり皆さん気になるのは、この次にですね、どんな AI が来るのかと、これから有望な AI もしくは AI 関連企業、その次の AI の宝の山は何なんだと思うんですけども、今もしシェアしていただける範囲でですけども、次の AI の宝の山って何でしょうか？
I think there are two things happening in AI right now. Number one is that foundation models are very quickly becoming commoditized. And for some people in Japan, if you guys have been paying attention to Google's AI releases, Gemini 3 is an incredibly strong model. And on a lot of benchmarks, it has overtaken OpenAI's GPT-5 in terms of raw model performance. And my prediction there would be that AI benchmarks don't really matter because everyone is so good and AI can do the vast majority of intellectual tasks already. So it almost doesn't matter like how good the model is. I think the only areas where performance matters is in very specialized domains. Like Anthropic has been very good at specializing in specific domains such as AI for science, as well as AI for coding, as well as AI for enterprise. I think that's where the next frontier is going to be. And I think this is why OpenAI and Google and all the AI labs today are working very hard to acquire domain-specific data. There are so many data labeling companies in Silicon Valley serving these AI giants, and believe it or not, half of my LinkedIn DMs are data labeling requests. Right? People are like, "I'm going to pay you $200 an hour to label data for me," and a lot of people with PhDs get approached by data labeling companies as well. So this just shows, how much demand there is for vertical AI data, and that's the direction that AI companies are going in. But from there on, I think progress in AI is going to be marginal. It's not going to be like as revolutionary as the ChatGPT launch. The second thing that I think is happening is that there are new model architectures emerging. There are companies working on new model architectures. So for example, example, there's an architecture called Mamba, which is a state-space, it's a state-space model, like different from a transformer architecture. We actually backed a company in AI for biotech that specifically uses the Mamba state-space model instead of a transformer model. And there are other companies thinking about like other model architectures as well. But I think that's relatively, that's a wild card. It's very hard to predict what the next model architecture is. But if we see a new model architecture, that's when I would say like we're going to see a transformation in AI model performance.
そのトランスフォーマーのではないものがなかなか今予測ができないというところだったんですけども、その変化をつかまえようとした場合、何を見てればなんか次の変化が見つかりそうですか？
I think there's a lot of new papers coming out. So for example, the Mamba paper actually came out from an academic lab back in the end of 2023, I believe. And there's, these new model architectures mostly coming out from academic labs and not from the big AI foundation model companies. And this is because the foundation model companies are very deeply entrenched in the transformer architecture. Everyone they've hired, all of the infrastructure they've built out, all the GPUs they configured are all for training and fine-tuning and post-training transformer-based models. So it's very, very hard for them to like produce a lot of interesting work outside of the foundation model, the transformer model architecture. And also, if they find something new, they're not going to publish it. So I think the best source of information is from academic papers and also open source models. There's a lot of really interesting stuff happening in the open source community that touches upon new model architectures as well. And when DeepSeek came out, we were actually one of the first funds in Silicon Valley to do a deep dive on DeepSeek's architecture. Of course, it's still the same transformer architecture. There's not a whole lot of change, but there are small things that DeepSeek has been doing very differently compared to what OpenAI or Anthropic are doing. And we think that's all very fascinating.
この日本は AI 開発にかなり遅れているという状態だと思うんですけれども、日本にとってこれからの AI の次のフェーズの中で日本企業もしくは日本人にどんなチャンスがあるかどうかって何かご意見あれば教えていただきたい。
I think there's a couple of opportunities for Japan specifically. I think the biggest opportunity is because Japan is sort of sitting between the US and China, and it has an opportunity to become a neutral ground for AI development because there are American AI companies and there's also Chinese AI companies. But I think what's lacking today is a place where people from all over the world can come here and just build AI companies and be seen as neutral. I actually know quite a few Chinese companies that have quietly moved to Japan to build their AI products here. I know, Manus at some point had like a team in Japan. One of my friends who has an AI voice company, he's originally from China and he's currently based in Japan, also in Tokyo, because he thinks that this is a more neutral ground compared to being either in the US or in China. So I think that's a huge opportunity for Japan to attract talent and also encourage local entrepreneurs to build for the world in a very neutral standing. I think the second like big opportunity for Japan is to really adopt AI in the enterprise. I talked to a lot of Japanese enterprises and it seems that people are very excited about the AI revolution and interested in adopting AI, especially given the aging population and the lack of young workers. I think AI is going to be a great opportunity for Japanese enterprises as well. I think that's an opportunity for Japanese enterprises to collaborate with startups from around the world to modernize their tech stack.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. ということで、AI の未来についてですね、期待もあります。そして懸念についてはかなりストレートにお話しいただきました。これまでご視聴ありがとうございました。いいなと思った方はですね、チャンネル登録、そしていいねボタン、さらには今日のお話に対するコメントもコメント欄までぜひよろしくお願いします。お願いします。